a lot of people crept into the church in AD 75. That was the beginning. The devil began to attack doctrine. And John, so if you are careful, John began to address all those heresies one by one in his writing. Those who didn't believe that Jesus was a real person, he said he was a son of man, he was a son of God. He addressed all of them one by one. Then in AD 93, there were fierce persecution. In fact, we cannot talk about persecutions because it was massive. Before AD 93, there was an emperor by name Decius. In the days of Decius, he declared openly to destroy any single believer on earth. And no single believer should remain alive. So you can just imagine, they were just killing the believers. Killing the believers. And after him was another emperor by name Valerius. In his days, he declared that if we're a priest, every pastor, automatically was going to be burned alive. And they would not give them the opportunity to even recant. They would be burned alive. So they were just burning every minister of God alive. They were just burning them alive. And there was a wicked one by name Diocletian. We'll talk about him briefly. But in the days of John, the emperor was called Domitian. Domitian set his own image in Ephesus. John lived in Ephesus, and Timothy also lived in Ephesus. John was living in the same place with Timothy. And John's house was around the public square. And in the public square, Domitian had set up a temple and his statue. If I'm moving and you reach where his statue is, you stop and you make incense. You make incense to the image before you cross. And amazingly, where John's house is just at the top of the statue. Because John lived on a hill. And just opposite where John lives is the statue of one of the 7 great wonders of the ancient world, Diana. Diana was a multi-breasted goddess. There were 6,000 priestesses who served Diana. And it was a gigantic image. It was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And in Ephesus, Diana had priestesses who were even teaching that it is possible. They even taught that Eve actually gave birth to Adam. And that was a doctrine that was even infiltrating the church. So in the book of Timothy, Paul said the man was not deceived, but the woman was deceived. And Paul said in 2 Timothy, he said that the woman was not first formed, but it was a man who was first formed. Paul was just addressing what was happening in Ephesus. Because it was taught that the woman was first formed and the woman is a giver of life. So in Ephesus, there was a kind of superiority complex with the women, and they subdued the men. And that had crept into the church. So John, when he's going home, he has to look at where John's house is. He has to bow to the image of Domitian and make incense. And John, you know John. You know John will not do that. John will just walk boldly and cross. I guess it was just Kemando Rebababa Soto Rebababa Kata. John will not succumb. So the emperor got annoyed, bored, and just caught John. And you know the story. John was fried in oil like a fish, cauldron of a boiling oil. They fried him, and he refused to fry. In AD 93, he was banished into Patmos. The isle of Patmos. And in fact, I've seen, if you see Patmos, animals couldn't survive in Patmos. There was no water. It was a very hard place. And where they placed John in Patmos, at the top was also the image of Diana. Diana was pursuing him wherever he went. Initially, they put him among gangsters to beat him, to kill him. They put him, according to history, they put him among wild beasts, and they couldn't touch John. They also brought strong men to beat him, and he converted all of them to the faith. When they came, they were all preachers and evangelists. That's why in Revelation it said, I, John, your brother and companion in tribulation and in the patience and the kingdom of our Lord Jesus Christ. And John was released after a while from Patmos back to Ephesus. Back to Ephesus. And in AD 96, when he was in Patmos, AD 96, that was when he was caught up and wrote the book of Revelation. In AD 96, he wrote the book of Revelation when he was caught up in Patmos. Then he was released from Patmos and he was freed because they couldn't do anything to John. We know he was the only apostle who was not martyred. And according to history, he died in AD 100. His death was a mystery. Some even said he disappeared. Some also said he died in Ephesus. Some said a whole lot. But they believe he either died or disappeared in AD 100. One of them must be true. Hallelujah. This is what happened in the first century of the church. The first 100 years of the church. It ended with John the apostle. John the apostle. And the churches were raised. There was fierce persecution. In those days, this time when you meet someone, hey, Bishop, hey, Charlie Happy, you couldn't be calling yourself such names. It meant death and persecution. Death and persecution. So that's why the believers had two signs to identify themselves as believers. Number one, they greeted Maranatha. If you give a certain sign this way, Maranatha, then you will know you are a believer. Another one was that if you were in prison, they had the sign of the fish. They draw a fish. A fish. The emblem of a fish signified the believers, meant that one is a believer. If the person pointed to the fish or drew a fish, your fellow prisoner is a believer. Because the word fish, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the acronym in Greek is the word fish. So you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. When you put them together, it actually forms fish, the word fish. So they just draw the sign of a fish. If you're a believer, you will understand me. In those days, fish. Hallelujah. Now, then came the second century of the church. The last apostle had died, was John. But the second century of the church. We are still in the formation. Now, in AD 67, someone was born, and his name was Ignatius. Then in AD 69, another person was born. His name was Polycarp. And if you want to be familiar with church history, you should never forget these two names. Ignatius was the bishop of the church in Antioch. And Polycarp was the bishop of the church in Smyrna. Polycarp was a disciple of John. John taught Polycarp directly. John taught him directly. He taught him directly. When John died, the one who actually took over was Ignatius. He was then the father. He was Ignatius. Ignatius was strong in the faith. He was strong in the faith. He did a lot of writing. He actually introduced the word Christianity. The word Christianity came from him. Tonight we'll understand the doctrine of Ignatius. There was a little error that caused the church into darkness. But the man himself was strong and fervent in spirit. For want of time, one remarkable thing you can know about Ignatius was his end of days, his martyrdom, how Ignatius died. Because Ignatius was called a father in those days. He was called father. He was a man of a great age. Great age. So what the Romans did was that the Roman proconsul, the leaders would just target the leaders and they would bring them and they would publicly put them in the arena to be devoured by lions, so that it will weaken the faith of the young ones. So Ignatius was brought openly. In those days there were amphitheaters, and there were arenas where, if you have watched, how many of you have watched Gladiator before? There's a movie called Gladiator. You know, the arena. That was how it was in those days. Paul said that God has appointed we, the apostles, last, as it were appointed unto death. The word as it were appointed unto death is like the death of the arena in Greek. He said the apostolic ministry is like fighting in the arena. Now when they put slaves in the arena to fight, you must fight unto death. You must win or you die. And that is the nature of the apostolic ministry. Paul said, God, we are appointed unto death. We are within the arena, and we are being watched. We are a spectacle unto men, unto the world, and unto angels. So within the arena, beneath the arena, underneath, were hungry lions that were wild, dangerous, savageous, and they were beneath. And you fight in the arena. After a while, they'll just release the lions to come. So Ignatius was brought publicly before the amphitheater. The amphitheater in those days could sit about 50,000 people. 50,000 people. And they brought them such festivities, special festivities where they honored their God. And they honored their God by killing the believers. Killing the believers. In those days, Christianity couldn't be distinguished from Judaism, the religion of the Jews. Rome was an empire. The Roman Empire allowed every nation to honor one God. To honor one God. So the Jews honored Jehovah, and they were all right with the Jews serving Jehovah. But with time, as Christianity began to grow, they began to see a distinction between Judaism and Christianity. And eyes were set on the believers. And then they realized that they were speaking of a coming kingdom, and they became a threat to the Roman kingdom. So they thought that they wanted to overthrow the Roman Empire. And they were misunderstood. And they also took communion personally. And one heresy they wrote against them was cannibalism. That they are proclaiming the Lord's death, someone's blood. They are drinking human blood and drinking human body. Meanwhile, it was just bread and wine. And Rome had their national god, which they all had to honor. Even in trade, if you were a worker, business, there was a god to honor. And the believers would not do all these things. So attention came on them. And the fires of persecution increased. They saw them as a threat to the kingdom. So every calamity that came, there were earthquakes. If there's an earthquake, they blame it on the believers. Because they are not worshiping the Roman gods. They've allowed earthquake to come. If there was flood or any natural disaster, they knew it was from the Christians. It was the wrath of the gods against the Christians. So they knew they were messengers of the gods to terminate and to annihilate and extinguish Christianity from the face of the earth. Hallelujah. So Ignatius was brought, and Ignatius was a strong man. The moment he reached the amphitheater, he raised his hands and said, "Oh God, I thank thee that you have honored me like Apostle Paul." And when he stood there, they released the hungry lions. He was just happy. In the face of the hungry lions, he was just smiling. Smiling. And he made a powerful statement. He said, "I'm a grain of wheat put into the mouth of these lions, that when I am ground, I may be found pure bread unto my maker." In those days, a lot of believers were thrown into the hungry lions. And it was amazing that when they were being eaten by the lions, they were eaten with worship. They were dying with worship. They were singing praises and they were dying. And it makes such an impact upon the masses. They wondered, what sort of religion is this? That the victims of death are happy in death. They wondered. Even the gladiators and the people that executed such sentences were so amazed. They were in wonder. What a people. What a people. What a people. There was a little girl by name Blandina and Prochorus. They preached the gospel, they preached, and they caught a girl, 21 years, to stop preaching Christ. He said, I'll preach Christ. They put her in a net, and she was tossed about by a bull. She didn't die. She came out still testifying Christ. Then they put her on a metallic chair, and they heated the chair. The chair was just blazing with fire, and she was sitting on it, proclaiming the name of the Lord, proclaiming Christ. Jesus is still the Lord. And she was dying, and she was being burnt, and she died or she was burnt professing Christ. And there were thousands of such people. And those days there were people, they were brought before the proconsul. Some of them initially denied Christ. They denied Christ. But when they go back, then they realize that they've been a fool. Then they will change their mind and they will go and give themselves again. They will go and give themselves again. So in those days, from Nero to Diocletian, from Nero to Domitian, there were 10 emperors that practiced systematic persecution of believers. They tried to destroy Christianity from the face of the earth. And that was their goal. The devil did all his best. It didn't work. It didn't work. So in the 2nd century, God raised 4 notable men. We have spoken of Ignatius. The second person was Polycarp. The third person was Justin Martyr. And the fourth person was Irenaeus. These were the giants God raised in that generation. All of them, Ignatius was thrown into lions, but the rest were burnt. They suffered martyrdom for the faith. The second person was Polycarp, who was in Smyrna. After the death of Ignatius, after some years, Polycarp was very popular in those days, and they sought him to kill him. 3 days before his execution, he had a dream that his pillow was burning. Then he knew that he was about to be martyred for Jesus. But the believers didn't want him to go away, so they took him and hid him in a bush, and put some wood together for him to live in a bush. Yet the Roman soldiers searched him out, and they found him in the bush. When they found him with their horses, they said they were taking him to Rome, and just asked them, "Can you give me an hour? Just give me 1 hour." And he served them with food and drinks. And he said, "Can you spare me 1 hour?" He went to his upper room and began to dance praises. In fact, as he was dancing and praying, the soldiers who had come to take him regretted, and they were just shaking their head. And they said to themselves that if we were not under a command, we would have left this man. So after praying for 1 hour, he came and said, "Can we go?" So they put him on a horse. They took him to Rome. When he got to Rome, there was a The moment he reached there, the whole place was flooded with people because they were all expecting Polycarp. And a visible voice came from heaven and said, "Be strong, O Polycarp." An audible voice came. Every believer heard it. No unbeliever heard it on that day. "Be strong, O Polycarp," and played the man. So Polycarp was led before the king. And he said, "Deny Jesus, your Jesus, and I'll set you free." Polycarp said, "Oh, 86 years have I saved him, and he has done me no evil. How can I deny the Lord my God?" And he said, "But if you don't deny him, we are going to throw you into the fire." And Polycarp just gave a smile and said, "Oh, king, I thank God for this opportunity. Because of a long time I have desired such discourse with thee." Then he said, "This fire burns, and in few hours it quenches into ashes. But there's a fire on the other side, whose worms dieth not, and whose flames is not quenched." Then he magnified Christ before him. Then they came to take him to the fire. He said, "Wait, I can go myself." Then he removed what he removed and walked majestically